The evening air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. The forest was silent, save for the occasional rustling of leaves. Alex had been out for a long walk, his boots crunching softly on the underbrush as he tried to clear his mind. He had come to this place to escape, to think, but tonight, something was different. The sky had grown darker than usual, and a strange, almost electric hum filled the air. He paused, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his side. The feeling of unease settled deeper into his chest. He wasn't sure why, but something was drawing him toward the clearing up ahead. He took a few steps forward, and then he saw it. A brilliant streak of light tore across the sky, too fast to be a plane, too low to be a meteor. The flash of brightness lit up the trees around him, and before he could react, the object crashed into the forest with a violent, thunderous sound. The earth shook under his feet, and a plume of smoke and dirt shot up into the air. For a moment, everything was still. Alex's heart raced as adrenaline surged through his body. The crash had come from the direction of the hills, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the source of the explosion, his instincts telling him to investigate. His mind raced with questions. What could it be? A plane crash? An alien spacecraft? The possibilities seemed endless. As he neared the crash site, the smoke cleared, revealing a large, dark shape half buried in the ground. The object was metallic, shaped like an escape pod from a spacecraft. It had landed with such force that it had left a deep dent in the earth. Alex slowed his pace, cautiously approaching the wreckage. The strange craft was smoking, its surface scorched from the impact. There were no sounds coming from it, and the forest was eerily quiet once again. He was close now. Every step felt like an eternity, his heart thudding in his chest. He reached the pod, his fingers brushing against the cold metal. The door was partially open, a jagged hole where the metal had buckled under the force of the crash. Alex bent down, peering inside, and froze. There was a figure lying motionless on the floor of the pod. At first, Alex thought it was a woman, but something was wrong. Her skin was pale, unnaturally pale, and her body was delicate, almost too fragile. Her hair was long and dark, falling in tangled waves around her face, but what caught his attention most was her eyes. Even in the dim light, he could see they were glowing a bright red, faintly pulsing like the dying embers of a fire. For a moment, he simply stared, unsure what to make of what he was seeing. Was this real? What was she? A human? Something else? The glow from her eyes seemed to be the only sign of life. Her chest barely rose with each shallow breath, and there was blood, her blood, staining the floor beneath her. Without thinking, Alex stepped into the pod and knelt beside her. His hands hovered over her body as he debated what to do. She was clearly injured, possibly dying, but he couldn't just leave her there. He had to help her. His fingers brushed against her cool skin as he gently reached to check for a pulse. To his surprise, he felt a faint, irregular beat under his fingertips. She was alive, but barely. Her breathing was labored, and there was a strange metallic scent in the air around her. "Hey," Alex said quietly, trying to rouse her. "Can you hear me? Are you okay?" Her eyelids fluttered, and with great effort, she opened her glowing red eyes. The moment they met his, Alex felt a chill run down his spine. There was something unnatural about her gaze, something ancient, and yet it was filled with fear and confusion. "Please," she whispered weakly, her voice raspy. "Help. Me." Alex's heart softened. She was human, or at least she seemed to be. He didn't understand what was happening, but one thing was clear. She needed help. "All right, I'm going to get you out of here," he said, trying to sound reassuring. He wasn't sure how he would manage it, but he couldn't leave her to die in this wreckage. He gently lifted her into his arms, careful not to jostle her too much. Her body felt light, fragile, like she might break if he wasn't careful. He looked around the area. scanning for any sign of other survivors or threats. The forest was still silent. It seemed like they were alone. As he turned to leave the wreckage behind, he felt a strange unease settle in. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had she been left for dead? His thoughts were interrupted when the girl, barely conscious, spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "They're coming," she said, her words barely audible. "Who's coming?" Alex asked, confusion rising in his voice. But she was already unconscious again, her head lolling against his chest. Alex swallowed hard, his mind racing. Whatever had brought her here, he knew one thing for sure: this was far from over. Alex's muscles ached as he made his way through the dense forest, the strange girl still in his arms. Her head rested against his chest, her breathing shallow and weak. Despite the cold evening air, her skin felt unnaturally warm, almost feverish. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about her, but he didn't know what else to do. She was human, or at least she seemed to be, and she needed help. The cabin was a few miles away, and the path was rough, but Alex had made this trek many times. He focused on the steady rhythm of his breathing and the quiet sounds of his surroundings. The forest was always peaceful at this hour, but tonight it felt different. The trees swayed in the wind, but the air was thick, charged, as if something unseen was watching them. As Alex reached the edge of the woods, he felt the girl stir in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open again, her red pupils glowing faintly in the dark. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice soft but filled with panic. "Don't worry," Alex replied, trying to sound calm. "You're safe. You're with me now." The girl's gaze flickered around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. I don't know who you are," she murmured, her voice tinged with fear. "But you shouldn't have helped me. They will come for you." Alex frowned. "Who will come for us?" Her eyes closed again, and she let out a shaky breath, her head resting against his chest once more. "My people. They won't stop until they find me. You should leave. Now." Alex's brow furrowed. She had spoken so urgently, but there was no way he could just leave her. She had no one else. He thought about the wreckage he had found her in, the strange pod, and her pale, almost sickly appearance. She wasn't like anyone he had ever seen before. He shook his head. "I'm not leaving you. We'll figure this out. Just hang in there." The girl didn't respond. She seemed to fall into a restless sleep, her body limp in his arms. He quickened his pace, knowing he had to get her somewhere safe. His cabin was small, but it was isolated and secure. It was the only place he could think of that might keep them hidden for a while. By the time Alex reached the cabin, the moon had risen high in the sky, casting pale light through the trees. His breath came out in visible clouds as he pushed open the door and carefully carried the girl inside. He laid her down on the couch, making sure she was as comfortable as possible, then grabbed a blanket from the nearby shelf and covered her up. He sat by her side for a few minutes watching her. Her breathing was still shallow, but at least it wasn't as strained as before. Alex could only wonder what kind of danger she had been in, and who, or what, she was running from. He went to the small kitchen and poured himself a glass of water, running over everything in his mind. The glowing red eyes, her strange warning, and the ship that had crashed. He had a feeling that things were about to get much more complicated. The girl stirred again, her eyes slowly opening. This time, she didn't seem as fearful. She looked around, as if trying to understand where she was. "Are you feeling better?" Alex asked, keeping his voice soft. She nodded, but her expression was still distant, troubled. I don't understand. Why did you help me?" Alex hesitated for a moment. "Because you needed it," he said simply, not wanting to explain further. "You're not alone anymore." The girl looked at him for a long moment, her eyes intense and searching. "You don't understand," she whispered. You have no idea what you've done." Alex felt a chill run through him, though he couldn't understand why. "What do you mean?" "They'll come for you," she repeated, her voice quiet but firm. "You should be afraid." Alex couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear in his chest, but he pushed it aside. He had faced danger before, and he wasn't going to back down now, not when someone's life was on the line. "I'm not afraid," he said, his voice steady. "Whatever's coming, we'll deal with it, together." The girl's eyes softened slightly, but she still looked uncertain. "I hope you're right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She fell silent again, and for a moment, Alex simply watched her. He had 1,000 questions, but he knew it wasn't the right time to ask. He needed to figure out what was going on, and fast. He turned toward the window and peered out into the night, the quiet forest stretching before him. It felt peaceful, but Alex couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Something was coming, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. Alex sat beside the fire, watching the flames crackle and dance. The warmth of the fire was a comfort, but it didn't quite ease the tension that had settled in his chest. He glanced at the girl lying on the couch, her eyes closed in what appeared to be a peaceful sleep. But Alex knew it wasn't that simple. Something was out there, something that had followed her, and he had no idea what it was or how to stop it. He sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hand over his face. He couldn't stop thinking about the strange words she had whispered earlier. "They'll come for you." Who was she running from? And why had she been left to die in the wreckage of that ship? As if on cue, the girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked at him for a moment, as if she didn't quite remember where she was. Then she sat up slowly, wincing slightly as she did. Her pale face looked a little less tired, but there was still an underlying fear in her eyes. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, setting his glass down on the table. He didn't know what else to say, but he felt an overwhelming urge to make sure she was all right. She nodded, though it seemed forced. "I'm better, but it won't matter. They'll find me soon." Alex didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood up and went to the small kitchen to get her some water. He wasn't sure how long she had been unconscious, but he knew she needed to drink something. He handed her the glass, and she took it with a hesitant but thankful look. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice still weak but sincere. I don't know why you're helping me, but I appreciate it." Alex sat back down, watching her carefully. "I'm just doing what anyone would do," he said quietly. "You needed help, so I gave it. You're not the first person I've helped." Her red eyes softened as she looked at him. There was a sadness in her gaze, a sadness that Alex couldn't quite place. He could tell she had lived through something terrible, something that had changed her in ways he couldn't understand. "You're different," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Most people would have left me there, or worse." Alex frowned. "Not me. I can't just leave someone to die, no matter who they are." The girl seemed to study him for a moment, as though trying to figure him out. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. It was small and sad, but it was a smile nonetheless. "Most people would have been afraid of me," she said softly. "They would have seen my eyes, my fangs, and run." Alex didn't know what to say to that. He had noticed the strange glow in her eyes, and the fangs were hard to miss, but none of it had made him feel afraid. If anything, it had only made him more determined to help her. "You're not what people expect, that's for sure," Alex said with a small grin. "But you're still a person, and that's what matters." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected him to say something like that. She opened her mouth to speak but hesitated, as though she wasn't sure if she could trust her own voice. "Why are you so kind?" she finally asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't know anything about me. You could have let me die." Alex shrugged. "Does it really matter? I know what it's like to lose someone, to feel like the world is closing in on you. I couldn't just turn my back on you." The girl looked down at her hands, a deep sorrow settling over her features. "You don't know what it's like to be hunted," she said quietly. "To have your own people turn against you for something you believe in. They see me as a traitor. I can't say I understand everything you've been through," Alex said, his tone soft but firm. "But I know what it feels like to lose hope, and I know what it feels like to have someone reach out when you least expect it. That's why I'm here. Because I believe people can be better than the worst things that happen to them." The girl stayed silent for a long moment, as if his words were weighing heavily on her. Then, to Alex's surprise, she stood up slowly, her movements cautious but determined. "I don't deserve your kindness," she said, her voice firm now, though there was a note of uncertainty beneath it. "But I'll try to make it worth something. I'll help you in any way I can." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Help me? You've been through a lot. You don't owe me anything." She shook her head. "It's not about owing. It's about trying to do something good, even if it's the smallest thing. I don't know if I can stop what's coming, but I'll fight beside you if you'll let me." For a long moment, Alex simply looked at her, considering her words. Finally, he nodded. "I'd appreciate that," he said. "We'll figure this out together." And for the first time since he found her in the wreckage, Alex felt a flicker of hope. Whatever was coming, whatever danger she was running from, they would face it together. The fire crackled in the background, casting shadows across the cabin as they both sat in silence, knowing that the world outside was waiting. But for now, they had each other. And that was enough. The next morning, Alex awoke to the soft sound of the wind rustling through the trees. The sun was barely rising, casting a golden light through the small window of the cabin. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, almost normal. But then the memory of the night before came rushing back. The girl, the crash, the warning. He stood up quietly, careful not to wake her, and walked to the window. The forest outside was bathed in early morning light, but a strange tension hung in the air. The world felt off, as if something was lurking just beyond the trees, watching. Alex took a deep breath and turned toward the small fire that had burned out overnight. He began to prepare some coffee, his mind still racing. The girl had slept most of the night, but she hadn't said much. He'd tried to get her to talk more, but she seemed withdrawn, lost in her own thoughts. He understood. Whatever she had been through, it wasn't something she could easily talk about. The silence of the cabin was broken by a faint noise from outside, a distant sound, like the hum of engines. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He stood still, listening, trying to place the sound. It wasn't the wind or any animal he knew. It was mechanical, and it was getting closer. A chill ran down his spine as he hurried to the door, opening it just a crack. He peered out, his eyes scanning the woods, but he saw nothing. The sound grew louder, and Alex's instinct screamed at him to get inside. He shut the door quietly and moved toward the girl, his footsteps quick but silent. She was still asleep, but the sound from outside seemed to disturb her. Her eyes fluttered open, and she immediately tensed, as if sensing something was wrong. "They found us," she whispered, her voice strained with fear. "They're here." Alex froze, his heart racing. Who is it?" She sat up quickly, her eyes wide with terror. "My people, the Draken. They're hunters, and they won't stop until they find me." Alex's mind raced. The Draken. He had no idea who they were, but the girl's fear was enough to make him take her words seriously. Whatever they were coming. And fast. "Is there anywhere we can hide?" Alex asked urgently. The girl nodded, her gaze shifting toward the back of the cabin. "The woods. It's the only chance we have. We can't stay here." Alex grabbed his jacket and rushed to gather a few supplies. They had to move quickly. He didn't know how much time they had, but he could hear the engines now, growing louder by the second. They were close. He looked at the girl, who was standing by the door, her red eyes wide with fear. "Are you ready?" he asked, trying to hide the anxiety in his voice. She nodded, though her face was pale. "We don't have a choice." They hurried out the back door and into the woods, the trees swallowing them in an instant. Alex didn't know where they were going, only that they had to keep moving. The Draken were coming, and he had no idea what kind of danger they posed. But one thing was clear: he couldn't let them take her. They pushed through the thick underbrush, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. The girl moved with surprising speed, though her energy seemed to be fading. Alex stayed close to her, keeping his eyes on the trees, trying to spot any signs of movement. But all he could hear was the sound of the engines, closer now, like a low, rumbling growl. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the trees around them began to shake. The noise was deafening now, a deep thrum that made Alex's chest vibrate. And then, through the trees, he saw them. A sleek, black ship, hovering just above the forest floor, its engines glowing bright orange. It was nothing like any aircraft Alex had ever seen. The ship was alien, sharp and angular, with glowing lights and a sinister design. It hovered silently, its presence heavy, like a predator closing in on its prey. "They're here," the girl whispered, her voice filled with dread. Alex grabbed her arm, pulling her deeper into the woods. "We need to hide. Now." They ran, weaving through the trees, but the ship followed them, its searchlights scanning the ground below. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as they ducked behind a large tree, hiding in the shadows. The ship hovered overhead, silent and menacing, its engines dimming as it slowly descended. Alex could feel his breath catch in his throat. They had no way of outrunning it. He could hear the girl's rapid breathing beside him, her body trembling in fear. "What do we do now?" Alex whispered, barely able to hear his own voice over the hum of the ship's engines. The girl was quiet for a long moment, her eyes scanning the trees above them. Finally, she spoke. "We wait," she said softly. "They'll land, and then we'll have a chance to escape." Alex's hands tightened into fists. He hated the feeling of being trapped, of waiting for something to happen. But there was no other choice. They had to wait. The ship touched down with a soft thud, its engines cutting out completely. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice, cold and harsh, echoed through the trees. "Search the area. She's here somewhere." Alex swallowed hard. The hunters were close, and he had no idea how they were going to survive this. The air was thick with tension as Alex and the girl crouched behind the tree, listening intently. The voice from the ship echoed through the forest, cold and commanding. The hunters were close, their footsteps crunching through the underbrush as they searched for any signs of movement. "They won't stop," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "You have to run. They'll kill you if they find you." Alex's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to leave her. He couldn't. He didn't know who these Draken were or what they were capable of, but he wasn't going to let them take her without a fight. She was scared, and that was enough for him to stand his ground. "We're not running," Alex whispered back, his voice low but firm. "We're getting out of this together." The girl turned her red eyes to him, disbelief written across her face. "You don't understand. They're not like anything you've seen before. They will hunt you down." Alex didn't respond. He didn't have time for doubts. The ship was still hovering, silent now, as if waiting for the hunters to find their prey. He glanced at the girl. She seemed exhausted, her breathing shallow, and her body trembled from fear and weakness. He knew they couldn't keep running forever. "We need a plan," Alex said, his mind racing. "We need to outsmart them." The girl's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Alex thought she might suggest something. But then her expression darkened. "There's no way to outsmart them," she said softly. "The Draken always find their target. No one has ever escaped them." Alex shook his head. "We're not giving up. We'll find a way." Suddenly, the crunch of footsteps grew louder. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he realized the hunters were getting closer, His eyes darted around the forest, searching for anything that could help. They had to get away before they were discovered. Then his gaze fell on a small rocky outcrop a few yards away, partially hidden by dense shrubs. It was the only cover nearby that might give them a chance to escape. Without hesitation, Alex grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her toward the rocks. "Come on," he urged, his voice urgent. "We don't have much time." She hesitated for a moment, but then followed him, her footsteps quick but shaky. As they reached the rocks, Alex crouched low, urging her to do the same. They pressed their bodies against the cold stone, holding their breath as they listened for the approaching hunters. The sound of footsteps grew louder, until Alex could hear the hunters' voices clearly. "Split up. Search every corner of this forest. She's here somewhere," one of them said, their tone cold and methodical. The other voice answered, "Keep your eyes sharp. She's dangerous. She'll do anything to survive." Alex's stomach twisted. The girl had said they wouldn't stop until they found her. And now it seemed like the hunters were closing in. He could hear the faint hum of their weapons, the software of advanced technology. But then, as the footsteps neared, a thought struck him. "I have an idea," he said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl looked at him, her red eyes wide with curiosity. "What are you thinking?" "If they want to find you, we'll give them something to find," Alex said, his voice determined. "We'll create a distraction." The girl's face twisted in confusion. A distraction? How? Alex reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It was an old flare gun, something he'd kept just in case. He hadn't used it in years, but now it felt like the only option. He pointed the flare gun toward the sky and pulled the trigger. The loud whoosh of the flare exploding into the air was deafening, lighting up the night sky in a burst of bright red. The flare shot high above the trees, its light glowing like a beacon. The hunters froze, their voices muffled by the flare's blinding light. Alex didn't wait to see if it worked. He grabbed the girl's arm and tugged her toward the dense woods again. "Now," he shouted, urging her forward. They moved quickly, their footsteps barely making a sound as they ran through the underbrush. The flare had worked. The hunters were distracted, their attention drawn to the sky. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them a head start. As they ran, Alex kept glancing over his shoulder, watching for any signs of pursuit. The ship was still visible above them, hovering silently, its searchlights scanning the ground below. But the hunters were focused on the flare now. The moment they realized it was a trick, it would be too late. They would be a long way away by then. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the forest. The ground sloped downward, leading to a small stream. Alex didn't hesitate. He grabbed the girl's hand and led her toward the water. The sound of the stream flowing over the rocks drowned out their footsteps, offering them a moment of cover. "We need to keep moving," Alex said, his breath coming fast from their run. "We can't stop now." The girl nodded, though she was still breathing heavily, her body barely able to keep up. You're not like anyone I've ever met," she said, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. Alex didn't have time to respond. He pulled her along, focused on the path ahead. There was no turning back now. They were in this together, and no matter what came next, Alex wasn't going to stop fighting for her safety. As they disappeared into the shadows, the sound of the hunters grew distant. For the first time since they had met, Alex felt a small spark of hope. The forest was dense, the shadows stretching long as the early morning sun struggled to break through the thick canopy of trees. Alex and the girl moved swiftly, their feet barely making a sound on the soft earth beneath them. The cold water of the stream splashed at their ankles as they waded through it, their breath still heavy from their flight through the woods. Alex kept glancing over his shoulder, every rustle in the underbrush making his heart race. The hunters were out there, and even though the flare had given them a brief head start, he knew they wouldn't be fooled for long. They were persistent, methodical, and far more experienced than he was. The girl had been right. Escaping them wouldn't be easy. "We can't keep running forever," Alex said quietly, his voice tinged with frustration. His legs were beginning to ache, and he knew the girl was struggling too. "We need to find shelter. Somewhere they won't expect us." The girl glanced around, her sharp eyes scanning the trees, the expression on her face unreadable. She opened her mouth to speak but then stopped, her gaze focusing on something in the distance. Alex followed her eyes, and his stomach dropped. In the distance, hidden by a thick group of trees, was a small, run-down cabin. It looked abandoned, with its roof sagging, and the walls covered in vines, but it was the only cover they had for miles. Alex didn't hesitate. "Let's go," he said, pulling her gently in the direction of the cabin. They moved quickly but quietly, their footsteps light against the damp ground. As they approached the cabin, Alex motioned for the girl to stay behind a large tree while he checked for any signs of danger. His heart pounded in his chest. They couldn't afford to make any noise. If the Draken had picked up their trail again, they would need to be ready. After a few tense moments, Alex crept up to the cabin and peered inside. The place was empty, the air stale but undisturbed. It looked like no one had been there in years. The walls were covered in moss, and the floor was covered with dust, but it was a safe place to rest for a while. He nodded to the girl and waved her over. She moved quickly, her eyes still darting around, wary of any sudden movement. As she entered the cabin, Alex closed the door softly behind them, sealing themselves inside. They were safe, at least for now. The girl slumped against the wall, her breath still shaky. "This place, it's old," she said quietly. "I didn't think anyone still lived here." Alex sat down beside her, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "I don't think anyone does, but we'll take it. We need to regroup and figure out what to do next." The girl nodded but didn't speak. She was still trembling, but Alex could see the way her eyes scanned the cabin, as if searching for any sign of life or movement. She had clearly been through a lot, more than he could understand. He wanted to help, but he wasn't sure how. "We'll figure this out," he said, trying to reassure her. "We just need to stay calm. You're not alone anymore." She looked at him then, her red eyes full of a mixture of gratitude and fear. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "The Draken, they won't stop until I'm dead. I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Alex frowned. "I'm not going to let them hurt you. We're going to stop them. I won't let anyone hurt you again." For a long moment, the girl didn't respond. She just stared at him, as if trying to read him, trying to decide if she could trust him. Then, finally, she spoke. "I'm not from this planet," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I was born on another world, far away from here. The Draken, they came for my people. They took everything from us." Alex felt a chill run through him as he listened to her story. "The Draken destroyed your planet?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. The girl nodded, her eyes distant. "They wiped out my entire civilization. My family, my friends. They were all gone before I even had a chance to escape. I was the only one left, and I was on the run ever since." Alex didn't know what to say. Her words were heavy, and he could feel the weight of her loss pressing down on him. The Draken weren't just hunters. They were conquerors, destroying entire worlds. It was hard to imagine the kind of pain she must have felt, knowing that everything she loved had been taken from her. "So, why did they come for you?" Alex asked, his curiosity now mixed with concern. "What did you do?" The girl hesitated before answering. "I didn't follow their orders. I couldn't. They wanted me to betray my people, to become one of them. But I couldn't. I refused. And that's why they've been hunting me." Alex clenched his fists, anger bubbling up inside him. "That's horrible. No one should ever be forced to choose between their people and their beliefs. She nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. That's why I'm still alive. Because I fought back. But now, I'm the last one. And I don't know how much longer I can survive. Alex stood up and walked over to her, his voice firm. You're not alone. I'm with you, and I won't let you fight this battle by yourself. We'll stop them together. For the first time since Alex had found her, the girl seemed to relax a little. There was a flicker of hope in her eyes, and Alex knew that, even though the road ahead was uncertain and dangerous, they were stronger together. As they sat in the quiet cabin, with only the sound of the wind outside, Alex made a promise to himself. No matter what it took, he would protect her. And together, they would find a way to stop the Draken and bring justice to her lost people. The day passed slowly in the cabin, the sun sinking lower in the sky as Alex and the girl rested. There was no sign of the hunters, but Alex knew it was only a matter of time before they found them again. The flare had bought them some time, but that wouldn't last forever. The girl, whose name Alex had learned was Lyra, sat quietly by the window, her eyes scanning the forest outside. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional chirp of birds or the rustling of the trees in the wind. She hadn't spoken much after sharing her story, but Alex could tell the weight of her past was heavy on her shoulders. He sat across from her, sharpening a small knife he had found in the cabin. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He knew they needed to make a plan, but he didn't have all the answers. What could a man like him do against hunters from another world? What chance did they have? We can't keep hiding forever, Alex said, his voice breaking the silence. Lyra looked over at him, her eyes still full of fear, but also something else. You're right. The Draken will find us again. They always do. She paused, then stood up, her movements slow but purposeful. But maybe this time, we can take the fight to them. Alex looked up, surprised by the determination in her voice. What do you mean? I've been on the run for so long, she said, her voice steady now. But I've never faced them head-on. I've always been running, hiding. But now, maybe we can stop them for good. Alex stood up, his heart racing. You're talking about fighting them? Lyra nodded. Yes. The Draken are powerful, but they're not invincible. They might have advanced technology, but they rely on their numbers and their cruelty. We can use their arrogance against them. Alex's mind raced. He knew this was dangerous, but they couldn't keep running. If they were ever going to stop the Draken, they needed to take action. All right, he said, his voice full of resolve. Let's do it. But we need a plan. Lyra's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since Alex had met her, he saw a fire in her eyes. She seemed to transform before him, no longer the frightened girl he had found in the forest. Instead, she was a warrior, ready to fight for her survival. We'll use the Draken ship against them, she said. It's close, and it's heavily guarded, but I know its weaknesses. We can disable their ship and turn it against them. Alex's heart raced. It was a dangerous plan, but it was their best shot. How do you know all this? Lyra's eyes darkened, and she looked away for a moment. Because I used to be one of them. I was trained by the Draken. I know how they think. Alex swallowed hard. He had known that she had been running from them, but hearing her say it out loud made everything feel much more real. She had been one of them. The thought sent a chill down his spine. You were one of them, he asked, his voice quieter now. Lyra nodded, her expression hardening. Yes, but I couldn't follow their orders. I couldn't betray my people. That's why I escaped. Alex stood still for a moment, processing her words. She had been an enemy soldier once, but now she was on his side. It was hard to wrap his mind around it, but one thing was clear. She was his ally now. All right, Alex said, his voice steady. We'll do it. We'll take down the Draken. Lyra gave him a small, grateful smile. I couldn't do this without you. You've shown me that not all humans are the same. You've shown me that there's still hope. They didn't waste any more time. The two of them moved quickly, gathering supplies from the cabin. Lyra led the way, her movements swift and efficient, as she showed Alex the hidden pathways through the forest. They had to be careful. If the Draken were still searching, they couldn't afford to be seen. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, night had fallen. The Draken's ship was still hovering in the distance, its lights faintly visible through the trees. Alex's pulse quickened as he realized how close they were to their target. It was now or never. They crept closer, staying hidden in the shadows. Lyra led Alex to a small hill overlooking the ship. The Draken were still on the ground, their search parties combing the area. But the ship itself was quiet, almost abandoned. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with determination. "We'll climb up the back and disable the engines. Once they can't fly, we'll force them to land. We'll fight them on our terms." Alex nodded, his grip tight on the small knife he had. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The real weapon was their teamwork and their will to survive. They moved forward, slowly and cautiously, avoiding the Draken's patrols. They reached the ship's back undetected. The engines were still warm, and the air around them hummed with energy. Lyra's fingers worked quickly, using a small tool to access the ship's engine systems. She muttered to herself as she worked, her concentration intense. Alex kept watch, every muscle in his body tensed and ready. Finally, Lyra looked up, a spark of triumph in her eyes. "It's done. The engines are disabled." Without wasting another second, they moved into position. The Draken were still searching, unaware of the trap that had just been set for them. As the first Draken soldier approached the ship, Alex and Lyra struck. They fought with everything they had, Lyra with her precision and skill, Alex with his sheer will to protect her. It was a battle like no other, and the Draken were caught off guard. In the end, it was a small victory, but it was theirs. The Draken had underestimated them, and now they had the upper hand. As the last Draken soldier fell, Lyra looked at Alex, her expression one of relief and gratitude. "We did it," she said, her voice soft. "We won." Alex smiled, though his body ached from the fight. "Yeah, we did. But this is just the beginning." Together, they stood there, knowing that they had taken the first step toward stopping the Draken for good.